Hello, everyone. Welcome to Young Guns. Today, we're going to be previewing the Alamo Bowl with Matthew Miller, who did a great job with D4 on the Texas postgame show. Thanks so much for making time out of your busy holiday season for us, Matthew.
No problem. I can't wait to talk about it.
All right. So, what were the expectations heading into the season for the Longhorns? Were they thinking better than 8-4, or is it 8-4 about right? Or do you think they even exceeded expectations on the season?
Okay, so going into the season as a Texas fan, D4 and I discussed this on the Mark Rogers channel, like a preview show, and we said we both predicted 8-4. Actually, that's what we predicted. So we're happy with that. But then watching the season unfold, I feel like there was more left on the table. Like I think this is a 10-2 football team. I really believe that we should have won the Texas Tech game. I think there's a possibility. I'm not going to say 100% that we beat Alabama with Quinn Ewers, but I think there's a really high percent chance, especially the way he was playing, that we beat Alabama. The other two losses, Oklahoma State just dominated us. Like I can't even say anything about that. They won that game fair and square. So I think this is a 10-2 team. I really believe that. And 8-4 is okay going into the season, but then how the season unfolded, I think we left too much meat on the bone there, in my opinion.
How good do you think Texas would have done this year if they had have beaten Alabama record-wise?
That's a really good question. That's one of those that kind of reminds me of the Oklahoma game last year, where if you saw we had that big lead, we're blowing them out, and then they come back and win, and then our season falls apart. I think it could have been the opposite. I think if we beat Alabama, I think that skyrockets us. I think we play much better. I think there's a possibility at that point of 11-1 because I think of confidence is a gigantic thing, especially in college football. And confidence in also building the culture. And that's one thing that Sark, I think, has gotten better at, like from year 1 to year 2. You don't see guys quit. In year 1, you saw guys quit. There were multiple guys who just didn't want to tackle people in games and stuff like that. So I think that could have been like a boost into our season. But overall, it's a good season, not a great season, but definitely would have been a boost if we beat Alabama. And I think we would have taken a big step forward if we would have done that.
So Bijan Robinson is opting out of the Alamo Bowl. What kind of impact do you think that's going to have on Texas, good or bad?
So a couple things. Bijan, obviously, in my opinion, this was going into the season. I thought he's the best running back. I thought he solidified that. The guy has exceptional vision, and then the balance also is one of those things. Mark and I have talked about this. Like, I don't think there's many guys that you see who take contact like behind the line of scrimmage, bounce off of it, and then able to get 5-6 yards like that. Like, that's very elite. It's very rare. So obviously, you're going to miss that type of thing. Out of the backfield as well. Very good pass catcher. That's one thing that people don't really talk about. There's a couple plays. If you go back to the Alabama game, there's a throw by Hudson Card that if it's in stride, it's a touchdown where Bijan has to turn and make a catch over his left shoulder, and it's a fantastic catch. So we're obviously going to miss that. Another guy we're going to miss is Roschon Johnson. I think Roschon Johnson is the best backup or one of the 2 or 3 best backups in college football. Right now, he's ranked as the 10th best running back going into the NFL draft as a backup running back. That's pretty good. So obviously, I've talked about Jonathan Brooks as well, who people will finally get to see. I think when people watch him, you'll kind of forget about Bijan Robinson. I really do believe that. I don't think he's as good. I don't think he's going to be as good in the NFL, but I do believe he's an NFL player. I believe he's going to put up better numbers because of the offensive line class we have brought in the last 2 years. And I think he reminds me a lot of Le'Veon Bell, very slow in the backfield, but then once he finds the hole, he hits it hard and explodes through it. And I think that's going to be really fun to watch versus this Washington team, who's a very good team also.
So, what did you think of when you hired Sark? What were the expectations, and what do you think of him now after 2 seasons in Austin?
So I was shocked by the hiring of Steve Sarkisian. Like, I thought Tom Herman was going to be fired, and that process played out very slowly. And Chris Del Conte, the athletic director, is this type of guy. He kind of did the same thing in basketball with Shaka Smart and Chris Beard, to where he wants to get that hire in place before he actually fires the guy. And that was pretty clear because Steve Sarkisian was hired within 2 hours of Tom Herman being fired. So that was pretty clear stuff going on in the background that you're like, okay, I'm going to go get my guy, and then we're going to let go of Tom Herman, because it was also late in the process. I believe it was like 2 or 3 weeks before signing day. So that was very interesting. Obviously, Steve Sarkisian, brilliant offensive mind. He showed that at the NFL. He showed that in college. The issue is he's never won more than 8 games in a season. That's the most he's ever won. I think people underrate his Washington stint because people don't realize they were 0-12 the year before he took over, and he brought him to 6-6, I believe, his first year. So he's not a bad coach. Is he a great coach? No, there's no track record to prove that. But do I think he's an average coach right now? Yes. I think there's room for growth there, and I think you've seen that. And I also think people don't talk about this enough. The man is a recovering alcoholic, and I think that matters going into life. Like, you have to learn from your process, your struggles, and I think that helps with his coaching. Honestly, I think you see that. You see a lot of humbleness, and that's the total opposite of Tom Herman. Tom Herman was very cocky, very arrogant, and refused to change. And I think Tom Herman could be a good football coach if he looks himself in the mirror and decides to change. So Steve Sarkisian, there's aspects I like about him. There's aspects I don't like about him. For Brandon and I, D4, we believe that this was the building year. Next year is the year. We have to be in the Big 12 championship game next year and hopefully win it. You have to do that next year. There's no excuses. I expect the Big 12 to be about the same next year. And honestly, we should have gone 10-2 in the Big 12 this year, or 10-2 record overall.
Do you think that Quinn Ewers would have played better the rest of the season if he hadn't gotten hurt? Or do you think the injury was the main reason that when he returned that he struggled so poorly? Or do you think that it was just he hit a rut?
I thought there's two ways to look at this. It's one of those things where his confidence could have gotten too high from that game if we win, and he would have been like a Brett Favre type guy, just straight up gunslinging it and not really like thinking about his decisions. Now, when you watch him, I think it's more of like he's just young. Like, he looks at his first read way too often and goes there no matter what when you have guys running open. And that's his big concern. And that's a concern with most young quarterbacks. There's very few Trevor Lawrences. I think most people expect people to just come in and dominate, and they don't. Like, CJ Stroud struggled with Ohio State when he came in. Like, his first 4 or 5 games were not that good. He put up numbers, but that's mostly because you were playing not very good teams. Where I think you have to expect growth. You have to expect bumps in the road, and that's what you got with Quinn Ewers, because he's not great at reading defenses. His footwork is sloppy, and you can get away with that in high school when you have a guy that can throw 60 yards off his back foot. But the thing is, you can't do that in college. And even if when he does get to the next level, just because of talent alone, he's going to get there. You have to be able to get those fundamentals down. You have to be able to read defenses, and you have to be able to set your feet when you throw. And if he gets those 2 things, I think the sky's the limit for him.
So on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the best, 1 being the worst, where would you rate the 2022 season of the Texas Longhorns?
Okay, so if you told me before the season we go 8-4, I would say that's like an 8 season, because that's what I expected. Watching the season unfold, I would say like a 6. I think it's above average season. I think it's a good, solid season, but it's not like what we expected. Like you guys said prior to the show starting, like Texas Tech, you have to win the game. You're up by 14 points with like 8 minutes left. You lose the game. You have to win that game. We should at minimum be 9-3 this season. I think the max we could have been is probably 10-2 if Quinn Ewers doesn't get hurt. So like I said, there was still stuff left there that we didn't accomplish. There was obvious growth. The defense got much better throughout the season. Like, after they played really well during the Alabama game, struggled for a couple games after that, but then from there on out played really good. I think TCU obviously is a good football team. They're in the top 4, and they played very good defensively in that game. I mean, they scored more points than our offense in that game, and Jalen Ford at linebacker has come on and played really strong. We're going to need him. I think he's going to come back because he hasn't opted out of the bowl game. DeMar Van Overshown, I believe, is the only guy on defense that has opted out. So that shows you also the type of buy-in that this team has. So overall, a good, solid season, but not great.
Yeah, but 2 positives of that season were you beat the Big 12 champ, Kansas State, at their own backyard, right?
We dominated them. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's awesome. And you shut out Oklahoma for the first time since 1965.
Yeah, that was fun. I'm not gonna lie, that was definitely the most funny. The best part of that, like the year before, like I'd never felt confident in that game. We always needed one more score than we had to win that game. Like we were only up by like 17. I needed 24 to be able to be confident. At halftime of that game was over to me. I didn't care what the score was because their quarterback play in that game was atrocious. Their offense is no good. Their defense gave up halfway through the game. So I was like, okay, this is fun. We just get to road grade them in the ground. This is gonna be fun to watch the second half.
So what do you think of the quarterback matchup in this bowl game with Michael Penix and Quinn Ewers? Do you think Quinn can hold his own and the rest of the Texas talent can push them to victory? Or do you think that Quinn Ewers has to match Michael Penix heading into this one?
I don't think he's going to have to match him because I think our defense is good enough to where we can hold them to under 30 points. So he's going to have to, in my opinion, this is a 31-28 type game. So he's going to have to score a little bit, but I don't think this is going to be like USC versus Oregon or anything like that, or USC versus UCLA. I don't think this is a super high scoring game. I think it's an average type college football game when it comes to score wise. And I think Quinn Ewers can hold his own if he plays like, if you saw the Alabama game, if he's making those throws, he can hold his own versus anyone. If he's playing like he did versus Oklahoma State, where he's completing 41% of his passes, we're going to get, we won't get murdered, because I don't think Washington will be able to score a lot on our defense, but we could lose this game 31-10. Michael Penix is very good. He was in, obviously, on a lot of Heisman ballots. He was good at Indiana, and then for whatever reason struggled, and then followed his offensive coordinator to Washington and Kalen DeBoer, and they've been great on offense. So he's a very good quarterback. I think there's a chance for him to make the pros, because he's got a strong arm and he's got more accurate. So it's going to be a fun game. I'm really excited for this game. I was going to be excited for to whoever we got matched up with in the Pac-12. I think USC would have been a fun game as well. But I'm 100% excited for this Washington versus Texas game.
What's the mood on Steve Sarkisian with the Texas fan base? Are more of the fan base still happy with Steve Sarkisian, or some starting to, not think that he's living up to expectations so far?
I think it's honestly split down the middle. Maybe 60-40 people are happy with him because he's actually, like, he's a good person. I think people see that. It's kind of like Charlie Strong. He got a little more leeway because he's a good person, whereas Tom Herman, probably if he acted like that, would have got another year, but Tom Herman's not a nice guy. So that's one of those things where I think people like Steve Sarkisian as a person. I think there's kind of in between on him as a coach. We like some things, like the first half of games, he scripts so well. We get these big leads, and then we struggle in the second half. We don't like that. But I will say the last 2 to 3 games of the season, we played much better in the second half. We've seen obvious adjustments, and going into the season, it was funny. We thought this offense would be insane. We thought we'd be averaging 40 points a game, and the defense would be the struggle, part of the struggle. No, the defense has been great the second half of the year, especially, and the offense has struggled. And I think a lot of that is we don't really have, other than Xavier Worthy, a guy that can stretch the field. People really don't realize Isaiah Nair getting hurt in the offseason was huge. That guy was a gigantic play threat at Wyoming, averaging over 20 yards a catch, I believe. He had like over 10 touchdowns and only had like 900 yards receiving on like 40 catches. So when we get him back next year with Xavier Worthy, and then you get Dante Moore, if you haven't seen him, he's a freshman coming in next year to Texas. Go watch him. He is fast. He's very fast. And Steve Sarkisian likes those guys. Obviously, he has a type like those 6-foot guys that can fly, like a Jalen Waddle, Henry Ruggs, Xavier Worthy. So I think it's going to be really exciting next year. And like I said, next year's the year for Steve Sarkisian. He's going to have to prove himself. We expect an appearance in the Big 12 championship game.
So what are the keys to victory for Texas in the Alamo Bowl?
I would say you have to be able to run the ball effectively on early downs to set up play action to attack deep, because that's when Quinn Ewers is at his best. If you watch a lot of bootlegs, a lot of one read type plays to where he doesn't have to think, he can just use his arm talent. So get 4 to 5 yard carries and attack deep and attack often. That's what you're going to have to do in this game. That's what Steve Sarkisian likes to do. I think that fits Quinn Ewers the best, because, again, it's not good for him to sit back there 4 to 5 seconds, read multiple people, and then deliver the football. You need him to see his first read, deliver on time, on target. And if he can do that, we can run up the score in this game. I really believe that. Can we? I don't know. There's been times where we've been able to do that. Most of the season we haven't, though. But again, it's bowl season always so interesting, because you get 6 weeks to prepare. Like, this is 6 weeks to prepare. Steve Sarkisian could literally have 50 plays that he scripted where they've run through, and that's literally half of your game, or even more than half your game scripted. And if that's the case, I think Washington would be in a lot of trouble.
Mm-hmm. So with Arch Manning coming in, do you think there's any chance he competes for the job next year with Quinn Ewers, or no chance of that?
No chance of that. Actually, people aren't talking about this enough. I believe Malik Murphy, our backup quarterback, could compete for the job. I really believe that. That guy is, as a junior in high school, he threw 71 yards. He's got an insane arm. He's a lot like, he kind of reminds me of like Joe Milton at Tennessee, where he has a cannon, but he struggles with accuracy a little bit. He's gotten much better, though. He played on a very bad team in high school, and he had to carry them, and they struggled his junior season, but he got better with his accuracy. And I believe they either came in first or second in the division in California for a state championship before coming to Texas. So I think he's got a chance. And Steve Sarkisian talked about him a little bit. He's huge. Like I said, 6'4", 6'5" with a cannon arm. So if Quinn Ewers struggles, that's the guy I'm looking at. I think Arch Manning, has a lot of good intangibles, but I don't know if he's going to be able to pick up the offense quick enough to where obviously he's coming from a great lineage of quarterbacks, but I don't know if he's able to pick up the offense quick enough to where I think he can start from day one. I think the plan has always been sit him a year and then let him come in. For us Texas fans, the perfect plan would be Quinn Ewers plays this year, next year, redshirt Arch comes right in. Like that's the perfect plan.
Do you think that Texas's offense matches up better with Washington's defense, or Texas's defense matches up better with Washington's offense in this bowl game?
That's a good question. I would say I think our defense matches better with their offense just because I'm more confident on the defensive side of the ball. Jalen Ford, again, our linebacker, should have been the Big 12 Defensive Player of the Year. He got absolutely jobbed. I think that's another thing, too, like why Texas is going to leave the Big 12 early, them in Oklahoma. If you've looked, I believe Texas and Oklahoma have only been called for like 3 holding penalties, or a team playing them have only been called for 3 holding penalties all year. There's an agenda, I don't care what people say out there, from the Big 12 against Texas and Oklahoma. And I think our defense, like I said, versus Washington's offense is going to be a very good matchup. I think if you're able to contain Michael Penix and, again, do the same type of thing where I think Washington wants to do with Quinn Ewers, where if you can keep him in the pocket, make him read the defense, make him hold on to the ball, and then also show some exotic pressure, which I think Gary Patterson has helped a lot with. You've seen a lot more corner blitzes off the backside, so that's going to be on Michael Penix, I believe, right side because he's a lefty. So that's going to be very interesting to watch. I think there is a possibility where this is a very low-scoring game because I think both these defenses are pretty good, and both these quarterbacks struggle with reading defenses. So if these defensive coordinators were scheming like I know they can, this could be a low-scoring game.
Yeah, because to your point about how Michael Penix struggled at Indiana, the reason why he did that one season is because he lost his confidence, kind of like with Quinn Ewers a little bit, and he was injured a lot. Since he's been at Washington, he's had plenty of time to throw the football. So it's all about the pressure. If you can get pressure on him, he completely crumbles. If he has plenty of time in the pocket, then he just picks you apart for sure.
Yeah, and that's one of those things I think Gary Patterson, like I said, being involved, he likes the pressure, and we've done much better this year. We still don't have a consistent one-man pass rusher. It's more of a team type thing right now, but we can definitely do that. I think guys to watch on our defense, Jalen Ford, Jahdae Barron, if people haven't heard of him, he's very good. He was all over the field in that TCU game. Also, Ovia Gofu off the edge is probably our best pass rusher. So those 3 guys I'd watch out for. Those are probably our 3 best defenders right now with DeMarvion Overshown opting out. And also Tavondre Sweat in the middle is a good defensive tackle who plugs it up nicely in the run game.
Mm-hmm.
So what are the strengths and weaknesses that Texas has that people need to look out for?
Offensive line is, when it's good, is good. When it's bad, it's really bad. It's very inconsistent, and you got to expect that. We have a couple freshmen playing on the offensive line. They're very young. We brought in one of the best, probably, offensive line classes in the history of recruiting last year, and you have 2 guys, one in Kelvin Banks, and then the other one in Cole Hudson playing, one at left tackle, one at, I believe, left guard or right guard. I'm not 100% sure which position he's going to play in this game, or if he plays. He was injured coming down the stretch. Those 2 guys, especially Cole Hudson, is hit or miss. You've seen games where he dominates people, and you've seen games where people dominate him. He really struggles with really big, strong guys in the middle who can just bully him. And that makes sense. He's a freshman. He's only 18, 19 years old, to where grown men can throw you around a little bit. So I'm not 100% familiar with Washington's defensive line, but if they have someone like that, they could probably take advantage. Kelvin Banks has been phenomenal. Kelvin Banks is one of those guys at the left tackle position to where he can be a first-round pick if he continues to progress the way he needs to progress. But that's definitely the one position group you need to watch. If Washington get pressure, they can dominate this football game. The other one is probably the linebacker core for Texas on the defensive side, because DeMarvion Overshown opting out, it's thin. And we were worried about coming into the year because we thought we had Jalen Ford, who was going to be okay. He's turned out to be really good. And then DeMarvion Overshown, who's really good, and he's opted out. So you really only have one guy. If Jalen Ford were to go down in this game, Washington could probably pick apart our linebackers with running backs in the passing game. Like, we would really struggle with that in this game if Jalen Ford were to go down or opt out. I don't think he's going to opt out at this point, but if he were to go down, we'd be in trouble.
Do you think bringing in Gary Patterson has helped out the defense, or do you think he's kind of just there?
Oh, no, I think he's helped. I think at the beginning of the year, Steve Sarkisian probably game 4 to 5 games against the most important opponents we had and said, go scheme these guys as much as you can. And I think you saw that, because if you look at the TCU game, our defense played great. The Alabama game, we played great. There were a couple other games in there that we played pretty well too. But I think it's mostly Pete Kwiatkowski. I mean, Pete Kwiatkowski at Washington was very good. He had always top 25 defenses other than the first year he was there. He struggled. his first year at Texas. But I think, again, that was players not buying into the scheme. That's why you saw all those guys transfer out after year one. A lot of guys transferred out. And I think he deserves most of the credit. But I think if you're giving me a percentage of like, I think Gary Patterson deserves 25-30% of the credit. I think Gary Patterson has taken certain plays and put them in the playbook. I think he's schemed against certain teams more than others. And I think you've seen that, like I said, versus TCU and Alabama, that come to mind and jump right off the bat. But I think Pete Kwiatkowski deserves the most credit.
How did the Texas fan base think that Hudson Card performed while Quinn Ewers was injured?
He gained a lot of respect because he was injured. Like, that guy was playing on one leg for most of the time he was in there. And then he also hurt his wrist, I believe. So a lot of respect to him. He has also gotten better. He struggled with a lot, like a lot of young guys do, with happy feet. Like, if you watched him, he was not confident at all. There would be guys open and he would just dance around back there and not be sure of himself. Like, there were multiple times too. If you go back and watch the Arkansas game, he could have run for 15 yards multiple times in that game last year and decided, and then waited at the last second and then ran and only got 3. So it's a confidence issue. But once he got that, which he seemed to get in the Alabama game because he played pretty well before getting hurt, and even played well when he was hurt. I mean, he was running on one leg. And I think whoever gets him, they're going to get a good quarterback. I think he's a good, solid B- college quarterback, and I think you can win a lot of games with him.
So, how long do you think Gary Patterson will stay at Texas?
That's a good question. I never thought he was going to come to Texas because he hated Texas, but I think it's going to be a matter of, can he get a top 30, 35 job at a good college football place where he can win? I think that's a question he would ask himself, because I think wherever he goes, it's his last stop. I don't think he's coaching anymore after that. So I think he wants to be confident in the decision he makes. And like, I think he's making between like $1.5 to $2 million a year at Texas. So it's like, you get to be in there, be an assistant to the coach, scheme. And the thing is, there's always a possibility if Steve Sarkisian struggles next year, Sark gets fired, and then Gary Patterson jumps in. So like, I think it would take a really good job. I mean, there was speculation. I think Nebraska was probably between him and Matt Rule, and they chose Matt Rule mostly probably because I think Matt Rule is a better coach, but because Gary Patterson probably didn't want to come. Like, that's a situation where if you're not winning 9-10 games a year, you're going to be fired within 4 to 5 years. So I think he's going to want to be comfortable and confident in the decision he makes, because it's going to be his last stop. So I don't know if he's going to ever leave, to be honest with you.
All right. So, what was the Texas fans' reaction to getting Quinn Ewers? Like, did they immediately think, okay, we're going to be so much better with him, or was it sort of a like, we don't know, this guy kind of just took the money out of Ohio State? Is this guy really going to buy into Steve Sarkisian?
Our reaction was obviously super excited. That's kind of why Tom Herman, I believe, lost the job. I think if he's able to keep Quinn Ewers happy and at Texas, he would have been there for another year. And obviously the fan base is excited because he's one of the 5 best recruits in the history ranked of college football. So it's like, yeah, we'll take him. It's awesome. But obviously he's not. That's the thing too. Like, we were expecting Trevor Lawrence, and we didn't get Trevor Lawrence. We got, I think, a good, solid guy that can definitely make it to the next level. But I don't think he's as special as he was probably made out to be. But I do think there's a possibility to where he can still be obviously a really good quarterback. I just don't think he's like a transcendent type player like a Deshaun Watson, a Trevor Lawrence. If people remember, Terrell Pryor, when he came to Ohio State, was kind of the same way. So Vince Young, obviously. So I don't think he's ever going to be on that level, but I think he can be level below that. And with the talent that we've started to recruit at the offensive line, defensive line, and then we've always gotten wide receivers and running backs. I think that, I mean, you can win a national championship with Quinn Ewers. I don't think he'll be the driving force of that, but you can win one.
What do you think the ceiling and the floor is for Texas once they go into the SEC?
The ceiling, I think, is probably underneath an Alabama, Georgia. I think we can live in that second tier, like an LSU, to where you're 8-4, 9-3 consistent, and then once every 5 to 6 years you're competing for the SEC championship and the national championship. I think that's a realistic ceiling. I think the floor is 6-6, 5-7. I don't think people overrate the bottom of the SEC. The bottom of the SEC is just like every other conference. It's not very good. The middle for most years is kind of the same as every other conference. There's some years where the middle is very good. That wasn't the case this year. But I also think we're going to get a recruiting bump because of that, just because it's the SEC. I think you get 2 to 3 more players than you normally do just because of that. And then also the money coming in. Texas loves to spend money on football as it is. They're going to spend even more now since they're getting more. So I think 5-7, 6-6 is probably the low point for Texas in the SEC.
It's going to be fun getting to see Texas in the SEC for sure, because it's going to be a lot of rivalry reunions like Texas A&M, Texas, Arkansas.
And the thing is, with the 12-team playoff, it's going to be fun because you can compete in the SEC and go 9-3, 10-2, and make the playoffs still. And you're going to get gigantic games. Like, there's going to be years where Texas, Georgia, and Alabama all play each other. Like, that's going to be really fun to watch, especially going to not neutral site games, which I absolutely hate. Like, we're going to have to go to Athens. They're going to have to come to Austin. We're going to have to go to Tuscaloosa. They're going to have to come to Austin. Like, that's going to be really fun.
But it's pretty cool that Texas and Alabama are going to be able to finish the home and home for next year. But, it's really unfortunate that Georgia, Oklahoma aren't going to be able to play each other next year as they originally were. So what was the reaction to that when you found out about the SEC commissioner saying, okay, so we're not going to do the little Georgia, Oklahoma home and home or Georgia, Texas, which we knew Georgia, Texas was going to be,
Yeah, because that's like 3 or 4 years from now. But that didn't make sense to me because why is Alabama, Texas playing if Georgia and Oklahoma aren't? That doesn't make sense to me. I think it's a matter maybe Oklahoma backed out because right now I think they would get absolutely steamrolled by Georgia. They'd probably lose like 45-10. So there's a possibility of that. I can't wait to go to Tuscaloosa next year. First off, we return most people. I don't know who the hell Alabama's quarterback is going to be. So I'm excited for that game. They have a lot of transfers out. I think there's a real possibility we can win that game. If we win that game, then there's a real possibility that we could be in line for a national championship type season. It sucks because I wanted to, when Texas played LSU and then COVID hit, I was supposed to go down to LSU versus Texas because I have a friend that goes to LSU, and that would have been absolutely fun as hell. And I'm going down there when that happens again. I live in Ohio, so it will be interesting if Cincinnati comes into the Big 12 while we're here. If they play Texas in Cincinnati, I'm definitely going to that game as well. That would be very interesting. I think that would be kind of cool for 1 year to have like UCF, Cincinnati, Texas, Oklahoma all in the Big 12 because you get a lot of weird matchups that you may never get again, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
And another one like Texas, BYU as well.
Yeah, we don't want to play them anymore. I'm done playing them. They kick our ass every time they play us. So I'm good. I mean, those 2 years where Taysom Hill's putting up 700 yards rushing in back-to-back years on us, I don't want to play them anymore.
Well, it may change next year. You might just beat those guys. So
I'm definitely more confident. But Taysom Hill running through the Texas defense, I think he legitimately rushed for like 650 yards in the 2 games they played. So that was not fun.
Yeah.
Do you think that Texas is finally starting to develop the talent that they got? Because there's a thing with Texas, like they always got good recruiting classes, but then like what the heck happened to these guys? These guys do not look like 4 and 5 stars.
Yeah, so that's the number one thing with Texas is we always get these guys in and then we never develop them. And there's 2 things about that. I think it's 1, or 3 things actually. We don't develop them. I would agree with that. 2, I think some of these guys are overranked because when they commit to Texas, you see about a half-star bump on some guys, not all guys. And then 3, we didn't get offensive and defensive linemen. If you go and look under Tom Herman and Charlie Strong, those guys were not the guys we were getting. We always get skill position players, but under those 2 guys, we did not get offensive and defensive linemen. I think total in Tom Herman's 4 years, we got like 9 offensive linemen recruited or 10, something like that. And under Steve Sarkisian in his first full recruiting class, we got 7. So it's one of those things where he actually values that highly. And he's like, guess what? You can have the best skill position players in the world, but if your guy has 1.5 seconds to throw the ball every time, it's not going to matter. So get your lines beefed up and ready to go. And we're doing that. And I fully appreciate that. I think it's going to pay off in the long run. So that's really awesome to see.
Yeah, I agree with that 100% because you look at teams like Stanford, like before they've struggled the last 4 years back in the earlier 2010s, and you look at like Wisconsin, those teams win because of the fact they have good offensive and defensive linemen. And today, if you have good offensive and defensive linemen, even with all the skill position players that there are, you can still win football games. And I agree with that. You have to have good offensive and defensive linemen and skill position players to be a fantastic team. Do you think that Texas is the favorite to win the Big 12 next season, or do you think that there's another team that will be the favorite?
I think you got to put TCU as the favorite. TCU is returning most of their guys. I don't know about on defense, but on offense, I don't know if Max Duggan's going to come back. I think he will.
Max Duggan's not returning.
He's not? Okay. But they got a bunch of guys in their last recruiting class. Obviously, Quentin Johnson as well is going to be gone because he's going to be a first-round pick. But they got a lot of transfers. JoJo Earl just committed there. I believe there's one other guy, I forget his name, but he's a wide receiver, highly recruited, is also transferring, and there's rumors that he's going to go there as well. So I think Sonny Dykes, I always like Sonny Dykes. I like also him at the fit at TCU because you get the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and if he can recruit that and build a recruiting monster there, then you get all these really good skill position players. You get good quarterbacks and stuff like that, and that's what he needs. He's like kind of like Oklahoma. I think they can be like a poor man's Oklahoma with Lincoln Riley. I don't think they're going to be competing every year to college football playoff, but I think they can win 9 to 10 games a year, especially when Texas leaves the SEC. I think they can dominate the Big 12. I really believe that. I'm just surprised of how fast it happened this year, honestly. I did not think this was coming this year. I think I had them at 6-6. I did have Kansas State winning the Big 12. I will say that. I'm very proud of that. I don't think many people had that. Chris Kleiman, great coach, just consistent. Like you said, Jeffrey, with the Stanford and Wisconsin thing, that's very similar. Really good defensive lines, really good offensive lines. And if you look at those teams like that, they really don't have great wide receivers. Most of the time they have like one good running back, like a Christian McCaffrey, a Toby Gerhart, a Deuce Vaughn type guy that mainly runs the offense. And that's what Kansas State's done as well. So I think it's going to be interesting going forward with the Big 12 without Texas and Oklahoma. I think Cincinnati's got a chance. I think UCF is also one of those teams, could benefit highly. I think those are the 4 teams I'm looking at to help move or take over the Big 12 when those 2 teams are gone. Oklahoma State, I just feel like, is always going to be a 10-win team. I don't think they're ever going to be more than that. I just don't think Mike Gundy has that in him. For whatever reason, he chokes in the biggest games every single year. So I think those are the 4 teams to look at going forward in the Big 12.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, yeah, it's going to be fun seeing that new Big 12 for next year for sure. You know, Texas Houston will be playing. I do wonder if they'll or not.
Yeah, that'll be interesting because, again, Houston, they kind of struggled this year when everyone thought they were going to be really good, and I don't know what's going to be happening with Dana Holgorsen. I don't know how they did recruiting-wise either, but obviously it's kind of like little brother type syndrome. So if Texas isn't ready and we do play them, they can definitely beat us. I mean, that's one of those things where those guys weren't really recruited by Texas, a lot of them, and they probably hold a grudge at that. And that's kind of like a TCU thing with the Texas thing too. I think that's why Gary Patterson was always able to beat us. He was able to fire those guys up, mostly 2 to 3, some 4-star guys, and to say, these guys didn't recruit you. You need to show them on the field why they should have recruited you.
And so for in this game, like, how do you think it's going to go down? Like, do you think that you guys are going to like just pull away at the beginning, or do you think you'll pull away in the second half?
I hate the feeling that I have because every time I get this type of feeling, I think it's going to be a blowout. I think we're going to kill them. I really believe that. But every time I believe this and I get closer to game time, my stomach turns the opposite way, and I think they're going to win, and they end up the other team. I think Texas is going to win this game. Right now, my prediction would be like 41-24 Texas. I think our defense is better than theirs. I think with the amount of time, this is just a regular season game. I think Washington probably beats us, but the amount of time Steve Sarkisian is going to have to scheme against this defense, script plays with this defense. Quinn Ewers has 6 extra weeks, 15 extra practices. I think you're going to see Jonathan Brooks burst onto the scene. I expect over 100 yards from him, maybe 150 overall. So I think this team has a really good chance. Also, Jordan Whittington, there's possibility he comes back for next year, and I think I have a weird feeling he's going to have a gigantic game in this game as well.
Why do some teams, as you point out with Steve Sarkisian, how he scripts plays and they start out games fast, and then at the second half they struggle, whereas other teams, they in the second half play much better than they do in the first half? What's the difference with that dynamic?
I think the difference is you're really good going into games, like scheming and looking at tendencies of teams and then scripting plays towards those tendencies to where, and then the other team adjusts in the second half. So like, oh, they're scripting towards these tendencies, and then you don't adjust. You have to adjust on their adjustments, and we don't do that. And I think that's a struggle. I think we've gotten better at that. Like I said, going into down the stretch of the regular season, I think it's going to be very important in this game. In the second half, if it's a close game, we'll see if he's able to do that and adjust. I think that's the one thing holding him back. I really believe that because we're able to get leads in these games. We're able to put up points in the first half. It's really about adjusting off the other team's adjustments going forward. And a lot of it is guesswork. You're going to have to think in your own head, how would I adjust if I'm attacking this way? And how are they going to do that going into the second half? And if you're able to do that, you're able to script plays in the second half, or at least put together a little bit of a game plan going into the second half that is successful. And I don't think Steve Sarkisian has been able to do that successfully a lot or enough. He's done that a little bit coming down the stretch, and I'm hoping it plays out in this bowl game, and I'm hoping it plays out in the next year, because if it does, this team has the talent, has everything else. It's really about that. It's second half adjustments, and we'll see if he's able to do that.
So I've noticed that all 4 losses of Texas have been 7 points or less. In all those games, what could have Texas done better in all 4 games against Alabama, Texas Tech, Oklahoma State, TCU? Where did they go wrong in all 4 of them?
Okay, so Oklahoma State and TCU, honestly, that was just pure domination by the other team. I don't think there's really anything we can do unless you just want to reset the mindset going into that game. I'm just going to tip my hat and say you kicked our ass, because they did. Texas Tech was about finishing. Texas Tech was, again, like a culture thing that was kind of left over from Tom Herman, because if you go back and look at Tom Herman, there's a lot of similarities. Like, you would go into first half of games against teams and you look pretty good, you would compete, and then the second half you kind of fall apart, you kind of quit. Some of that could be conditioning, some of that could be mentality. I think with Steve Sarkisian, it's mostly was conditioning, because you see it this year. There's no quit in this team in the second half. They're just not executing properly, and they're not in shape for a lot of some of these guys aren't in as good a shape as they should be, I should say. Whereas, let's see, Alabama, I think it's a lot of just Quinn Ewers getting hurt and also Hudson Card getting hurt. I don't even think Quinn Ewers has to be healthy in that game. If Hudson Card is healthy, I think we win the game. So I think that's mostly what that comes down to. The Texas Tech one is definitely the most concerning one, because that gave Texas fan nightmares of the Tom Herman era, of where you get up by 14, 21 points. There's another game like that where little Jordan Humphrey, I believe in 2018 when we went to the Sugar Bowl, we were up by 14 or 17 points in that game, and they came back and tied it, and we had to go drive down the field and win it. It's because they put the parking brakes on, and Steve Sarkisian kind of does that in the second half too. It's like we get a lead, and then he runs these very vanilla offenses instead of attacking like he did in the first half.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that Quinn Ewers can at least be in the Heisman conversation? Maybe Xavier Worthy as well next year. Or do you think those 2 guys can be in it and compete for the Heisman with Caleb Williams?
I think Xavier Worthy can, if he learns how to track the ball better. If anyone has watched Texas closely, he is not good at tracking the ball, which is weird quality for a wide receiver. Honestly, a lot of our players struggle with that. Our cornerbacks struggle with that. Our other wide receivers struggle with that. When the ball's in the air, they can't really seem to find it. So if he does that, he'll be fine because he's explosive. I also kind of question his buy-in at sometimes, because there was some rumors that he would transfer. I don't know if he's just trying to get more money, but I question that about him. And I can't fault someone for trying to get more money, but I also believe you can do it in a way that's more respectful than he's been doing it the last couple of off seasons. Quinn Ewers, it's going to be all about whether he improves his footwork and his decision making, and if he's able to read defenses. If he's able to do that, then yes, he can compete for the Heisman. But honestly, I'm going to keep riding this guy's name because I love him. I love to watch him play. I think Jonathan Brooks has a real chance behind this offensive line to put up big numbers and surprise people. And a lot of the Heisman, if you look back, is like guys that didn't have a lot of preseason hype, because then you get surprised by them and you're like, oh, wow, this guy's better than I thought. He's really good. Let's vote for him for the Heisman. Favorites usually don't win it. So, and Quinn Ewers is definitely going to be a favorite just because of the name and talent. And that's probably another reason why Caleb Williams isn't going to win it next year either, because we saw it this year. Bryce Young had a better year than he did the year before, but because he jumped onto the scene and had a really good year, and it was he had never won a Heisman, he won the Heisman. Like this year, he was better, and honestly was probably one of the 2 or 3 best players in college football, and should have probably got more votes than he did. So that's why favorites usually don't win it. So if you're going to boil it down to be Quinn Ewers or Xavier Worthy, I'd probably pick Xavier Worthy to win the Heisman over Quinn Ewers.
Yeah, Quinn Ewers, he had a really solid season overall, but you pointed out that Texas Tech game was disappointing, and it was because they were winning, and then obviously it went to overtime, and then Bijan Robinson fumbled the ball. But for me, one of the most disappointing games was the Oklahoma State game, because they should have won that game, and Quinn Ewers, his completion percentage was awful in that game. He was like 19 of 49. He threw for like 300 yards, but I mean, there was just no accuracy in that game, especially in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, there was Oklahoma State, and then the 2 games after that, I believe Kansas State, he didn't play very well in either, but we won pretty easily. And then there was another game, I forget, after that, where I believe I added up his completion percentage, and he was like 48% between the 3 games. Like, it was god-awful. A lot of that had to do with Oklahoma State. We'll give him a break. something happened in that game. He came out with a glove on, and he never wears a glove. He hurt his hand. I believe his hand got slammed in a door prior to the game, and then also you had like 30-mile-per-hour winds. So I think that's a lot of it in that game, and that's why it's also going to be interesting in the bowl game because you're going to be playing in a dome with no conditions, with extra practices, and he's going to be fully healthy. So I think you're going to see the absolute probably best version of Quinn Ewers in this game. That's also why I think Texas is going to win.
So, do you think Texas can put enough pressure on Michael Penix Jr. in the Alamo Bowl?
I think we're going to have to come with blitzes, exotic blitzes, because, again, you're not going to get guys. We don't have the guys up front to be able to go one-on-one and win. We just don't on that side of the ball. Our offensive line is definitely our offensive line is definitely ahead of our defensive line on that, like protecting. But offense or defensive line, we can get there. We're better versus the run, but we can get there if we bring it stunts and different exotic blitzes. So I think that's what we're going to have to do. And I think you will see that. That's what I will say. Again, you see Gary Patterson's influence because Pete Kwiatkowski really doesn't like to blitz that much. He likes 3 to 4 man fronts most of the time, whereas Gary Patterson just wants to attack the hell out of you. So I think they blended that nicely to where you get that sometimes, but you don't get that all the time. And I think it's going to be interesting because I think you could catch Texas if you get in the scenarios where you know the blitz is coming. You can catch Texas and attack the secondary because the secondary is probably the weakest part of our team, honestly. Our cornerbacks aren't great. So it's going to be interesting if Michael Penix is able to take advantage of that if he sees the blitz coming and can attack downfield because they have 2 1,000-yard wide receivers, so they like to throw the ball around, and they do it pretty well.
Mm-hmm. So what do you think the chances are next year if pretty much everything goes well to make the playoff?
Next year is still 4, correct? It's not 12. That's the year after, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So if we do what we need to do and win the Big 12, honestly, I think the Big 12 is going to be kind of similar to this year where you see a Kansas State team with 3 losses win it. I think a team probably next year is going to win it with 2. I don't think it'll be 3 again,
Okay.
but I think with 2. So I don't think we would make the playoff unless, again, it's this type of year where it's kind of or even you'd have to be even a little more chaotic than this year. And if you look at college football's history, you get this type of year like once every 7-8 years. You don't get this every year. So I expect the teams that are dominant to be even more dominant next year. The one thing that does help, Ohio State, CJ Stroud will be gone. Bryce Young will be gone. If you look at Clemson, you don't know about Cade Klubnik. So maybe I could be wrong because a lot of that has to do with quarterback play. And if you're replacing all these quarterbacks, Texas could have one of the best returning quarterbacks in college football. So we have a chance, but if you're going to tell me to put a percentage on it, 25%, I don't think it's like insanely high. I think there's about a 50 to 60% chance we win the Big 12 because I think it's really us, TCU. I don't think Oklahoma State can win the Big 12 with their quarterback situation. Kansas State will not have Deuce Vaughn next year, most likely. So I don't know about them as well. So I really think it's a 2-man race. I think Baylor will jump back in the conversation. So probably Baylor, TCU, and Texas competing for the Big 12 next year.
Ooh, the battle of the state of Texas.
Yeah.
I'm licking my chop as a Notre Dame fan. I'm licking my chops at that Ohio State game. I think we should have beat them this year, and I think we'll beat them next year. So
I think you guys definitely have a shot because I don't know about the quarterback situation there. And obviously, they're highly recruited guys at Ohio State, so they're going to be probably pretty good. But you're also losing a lot of wide receivers other than Marvin Harrison Jr., but you'll lose some of the wide receivers as well. Travion Henderson will be back, though, so I don't know. I think Ohio State will probably take a little bit of a step back, but they're Ohio State, so they're always going to be obviously very good.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on, Matthew. You're so knowledgeable about Texas, and you gave us a lot of insight about this game. So definitely excited to watch the Alamo Bowl.
Yeah, but before we go,
Okay.
where can people find you to talk about Texas football, Matthew Miller?
Okay. I should probably start a YouTube channel, but honestly, don't have the time to fully commit to that yet. So you can find me on Mark Rogers TV. Go there, go to the Texas channel. Please subscribe. It really helps out. We'll be live after the Alamo Bowl game on Thursday, me and Brandon. If not, for sure, me. I think Brandon will be there. And then I go on Mark Rogers pretty often as well. You can also find me at MatthewMS97 on Twitter if you want to talk it up. I'm willing to go on your channel. I love talking Texas football. So if you want to DM me on there, want me on your channel, or you just want to talk football, you can DM me on there as well.
All
right. Well,
thank you for coming on, man.
Yeah, thank you.
Have a great rest of your holidays.
And thanks for coming.
You too,
man.
guys. Yeah, thank you, guys.